My wife reconnected with an old friend from Italy, so I reconnected her with reality. My wife Wendy was always the picture of loyalty. In 20 years of marriage, she never gave me a reason to doubt her, until this Italian guy Tagliatelle moved into our neighborhood. Oh my god, that's Tagliatelle from Italy. Wendy practically dragged me over at the community BBQ. They'd met during our Rome trip 20 years ago when I had food poisoning. Just some bar friend, she said. But Tagliatelle was everything I wasn't. Italian accent, Rolex, Mercedes, real estate developer. Wendy couldn't stop talking about the coincidence. First, it was gym smoothies. Just catching up, she'd say. Then lunches at Italian restaurants. His wife was there too, she'd claim, just to ease my worries. The worst part was how her best friend Lisa, a woman who I'd come to see as my own sister, became her constant alibi. Wendy's with me, Lisa would text, even when Wendy's location showed something completely different. I was pretty set on confronting her when the shopping trip started. Wendy would leave our 8-year-old watching the 6-year-old for quick store runs, then come back 2 hours later claiming she ran into Tagliatelle and his wife at the mall and helped run errands. When I finally confronted her, Wendy twisted it. He has a wife, don't you trust me? Very soon, our credit cards became maxed out, and Wendy had a new designer purse all of a sudden. Gift from Lisa, she told me. Her nails were suddenly always done too. Lisa treated me. 3 weeks ago, my final straw came. Wendy left the kids alone for another quick dog walk past bedtime. She came home smelling like something I couldn't pinpoint. The kids were scared you left again, I said. She barely looked up. They're fine. Tagliatelle and I lost track of time. His wife left early. That's when I snapped. I needed proof of what was really going on. I knew she'd just tell me about his wife. I needed a different way to find out. So I decided to look at her old diary she still wrote in sometimes. It was sacred to her. I swore to never touch it. But that was the old me. The new me needed answers. I opened the page, and sadly, I didn't find anything about them right now. But what I did find was practically the same thing. An entry about our trip to Italy 20 years ago, where Wendy met Tagliatelle. I remember that trip so well. I got food poisoning from a crappy cheap restaurant and was bedridden with for 2 days. I was feeling frustrated I couldn't go out and explore with my wife, but because I didn't want to ruin her vacation as well, I encouraged her to go out and have a good time without me. Based on what she told me, she met some other tourists and went bar hopping with them one of the nights. It sounded like a good time, but I was in the middle of throwing up as she was telling me about the night, so I wasn't fully paying attention. I guess I should have, because in the pages of the diary, my wife started going into the details about how she ended up sleeping with some rich Italian local she met at one of the bars. My heart sank. She talked about the SX in detail, as well as the guilt she felt afterwards. In the diary, she explained that she had decided not to tell me since I was in such a weak state, and she didn't want to ruin my vacation any further. My hands were shaking. I knew what I had to do, not confront her. Instead, I had to investigate. I channeled my inner Joe Goldberg and found Tagliatelle's second IG account, which showed a single man's lifestyle. I ended up finding his supposed wife Elena on Facebook soon. I shot her a text, and her response confirmed my worst but expected fears. We divorced 6 months ago after I discovered his affairs. That was the nail in the coffin that broke me. Up until this point, I still wanted to believe nothing was going on, but now I knew. I had 2 weeks until Wendy's birthday party. She'd invited everyone, including Tagliatelle. He's become such a good friend, she explained. I argued slightly before caving just to put up a front. Then I helped plan everything. I ordered cake, bought champagne, made sure Lisa and Tagliatelle would attend, all while holding her diary like a loaded GN. Wendy's party was perfect. She wore a new dress, probably another gift. Tagliatelle arrived late with wine and a Tiffany bag. After cake, I stood for a toast. To my beautiful wife, 20 years of marriage, but let's talk about 20 years ago in Italy. I watched Wendy's face drain of color as the words left my mouth. Her champagne glass trembled in her hand, and I noticed Tagliatelle shift uncomfortably beside her. The party guests fell silent, sensing the tension crackling through the room. When I had food poisoning and couldn't leave that hotel room, I continued, keeping my voice steady. My wonderful wife went out and experienced Rome. She met some interesting people that night. Wendy's eyes darted to Tagliatelle, then back to me. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Lisa stepped forward from the crowd, her phone already in her hand, recording everything. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced down quickly. A text from Elena. I'm outside. Tag's car is here. We need to talk now. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and raised my glass higher. So here's to secrets that shape marriages, I said, looking directly at my wife, and to new beginnings. I set down my glass and walked toward the door. Behind me, Wendy's voice cracked as she called out, "Wait, please, we need to talk privately." The party guests murmured among themselves as Wendy pushed through them, following me outside. I heard Tagliatelle's footsteps behind her, his expensive shoes clicking on our hardwood floors. In the driveway, Elena emerged from her car. She looked exhausted, her hands wringing together as she approached. "I've been sitting here for an hour," she said. I couldn't decide whether to come in, but then I recognized Wendy from Tag's Instagram before he blocked me. The motion sensor light kept triggering as we all moved around the driveway, casting harsh shadows across our faces. Wendy's expression transformed from panic to rage when she saw Elena. "You're stalking us!" Wendy shrieked. "This is harassment. I'll call the police!" Tagliatelle rushed between the two women, his arms outstretched. "Elena, you need to leave. This isn't appropriate." Our neighbors had come out onto their porches, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Henderson from next door held her cat, watching the drama unfold like it was a soap opera. Elena laughed bitterly. "Appropriate? Like sleeping with married women is appropriate?" She turned to me. "6 months ago, I divorced him for cheating with our neighbor. It's all in the public records. He's already spent the settlement." She climbed back into her car and drove away, leaving us standing in the driveway as the party inside fell apart. Through the window, I could see the birthday cake sitting untouched on the dining room table. Back inside, I headed straight for the bedroom to pack an overnight bag. Wendy followed me, her voice alternating between desperate pleas and angry accusations. "It meant nothing!" she cried, then immediately switched tactics. "You violated my privacy. You read my diary." The kids were hiding upstairs. I could hear their footsteps overhead as they retreated to the 8-year-old's room. Tagliatelle hovered in the doorway, his Rolex catching on the doorframe with a scraping sound. He winced and examined the scratch on the expensive watch. "Maybe I should go," he muttered, but Wendy grabbed his arm. "No, stay. He's the one who should leave." I zipped up my bag and pushed past them. The party guests had mostly scattered, leaving half-empty glasses and plates of food everywhere. Lisa stood by the door, still clutching her phone. "I'm sorry," she whispered as I passed. The next morning, I returned to find the locks changed. My key wouldn't turn. I stood there, dumbfounded, until my phone buzzed with a text from Wendy. "I need space to think. You can see kids per our discussion." We'd never discussed any schedule. I met Elena at a coffee shop downtown. She looked looked more composed than the night before, sliding a folder across the table to me. My divorce filing, she explained, listed adultery and financial malfeasance. Tag got minimal assets in the settlement. He's probably broke. The barista who brought our drinks did a double take. Hey, aren't you Wendy's husband? And Tag's wife? Ex-wife, Elena corrected. My phone chimed with bank alerts. My hands shook as I read them. Wendy had moved 70% of our joint account to her personal account for safety. I discovered this while trying to pay for my hotel room, my card declining at the front desk. School pickup that afternoon turned into chaos. Wendy arrived with Tagliatelle in his Mercedes. She marched up to the teacher, announcing that he was authorized for pickup now. I had to show our marriage certificate to prove I had equal rights to my own children. The other parents formed whisper clusters in the parking lot, their eyes following our every move. My 6-year-old clung to my leg, while the 8-year-old stared at Tagliatelle with open suspicion. That evening, Lisa called me crying. My husband saw the party video. She sobbed. He says I can't enable Wendy's destruction of her family anymore. I have to choose between them. She paused, then admitted what I'd suspected. I knew the affair was physical. I'm so sorry. 3 days later, Wendy had me served with separation papers at my workplace. My co-workers watched as security escorted the process server out. The papers cited emotional abuse for reading her diary and harassment for Elena's presence at the party. My 8-year-old FaceTimed me secretly that night, whispering from inside her closet. Mom's acting weird, she said. That man cooked dinner and used your apron. He keeps calling himself Uncle Tag, but it feels wrong. I met with my lawyer the next day. He reviewed the papers with a grim expression. She wants the house, primary custody, maximum support. She's claiming you abandoned the family by leaving voluntarily that night. Elena emailed me that afternoon. She'd found a warning from Tagliatelle's ex-girlfriend from last year. He'll charm her, move fast, isolate her from family, then drain accounts. Classic pattern. Get out. The email had been sent to Elena's work account, which is why she'd missed it initially. Our first mediation session was a disaster. Wendy brought Tagliatelle as emotional support. The mediator firmly told him he had to wait outside. Wendy threatened to leave until the mediator explained the legal ramifications of skipping mediation. Throughout the session, her phone buzzed constantly with his texts. She could barely focus on the discussion, her fingers twitching toward her phone every few seconds. Wendy's mother called me that evening, her voice worried. She's canceled our standing lunch dates, won't return my calls. She showed up briefly last week with that man, and he did all the talking. She looked so tired. The kid's weekend visit revealed more changes. Tagliatelle had moved clothes into the house. He was using my home office. My 6-year-old mentioned that mommy cries when Tag goes to work. They brought me my favorite coffee mug, rescued from the trash. Lisa's marriage imploded the following week. Her husband had found texts showing she'd known about the affair for 2 months. She begged me not to subpoena her in my divorce proceedings. Our kids are best friends, she pleaded. Please don't make this worse. Halloween approached, and I took the kids costume shopping. Wendy claimed this violated our custody agreement, even though no official agreement existed yet. She threatened to call the police if I didn't return them immediately. The store clerk recognized us from happier years. Oh, the Pirates again this year? She asked cheerfully, not noticing the tension. Tagliatelle posted couple photos on social media constantly. I noticed Wendy's jewelry in the pictures, her grandmother's ring on his pinky finger. Clear signs he was establishing residence in my home. Then came the credit alerts. Someone had applied for cards in my name, with the billing address listed as our family home. The applications claimed income I didn't have, using security question answers only Wendy would know. The emergency custody hearing didn't go well for either of us. The judge seemed unimpressed with both sides, ordering a temporary 50-50 split. I will not tolerate parents using children as weapons, she warned. Wendy stormed out of the courtroom. As we left, the court reporter looked familiar. I realized she'd been at our wedding 20 years ago, Wendy's cousin from out of state. My 8-year-old's teacher called with concerns. She'd written an essay about having 2 daddies, and seemed confused about our family structure. The teacher recommended counseling, but when I brought the consent forms to Wendy, she refused to sign. There's nothing wrong with my daughter, she snapped. The essay included a line that made my blood run cold. Tag says Dad is trying to hurt us. I discovered Wendy had listed our house with a realtor, exploring options, her lawyer claimed, though both our names were on the deed. The realtor turned out to be Tagliatelle's cousin. Elena and I ran into each other at the pharmacy. We were both picking up anxiety medications, prescriptions from the same week. The pharmacist assumed we were together, and neither of us corrected her. Dark humor had become our coping mechanism. Wendy's sister reached out, planning a family intervention. She's lost 15 pounds in a month, missing work. Everyone can see that man is controlling her. She mentioned a bruise on Wendy's arm that Wendy claimed was from bumping into a door. The school Halloween parade was awkward. Tagliatelle showed up with Wendy to watch. He took family photos with my children while I stood apart, then immediately posted them online with hashtags like bonus day and modern family. The kids returned from their next weekend with disturbing stories. Tag and mommy had a big fight about money, my 8-year-old reported. The police came, but Tag explained everything. My 6-year-old had wet the bed afterward, something that hadn't happened in years. I discovered my 8-year-old had been keeping a journal, documenting the changes at home. Her careful handwriting described arguments, Tagliatelle's rules, and her mother's tears. My credit cards started declining everywhere. Wendy had removed me as an authorized user on our joint cards, but kept charging to them. They were maxed out, including charges at jewelry stores that I definitely hadn't made. Lisa's divorce filing included an affidavit about Wendy's affair. She needed to establish a timeline for her own case. She apologized profusely, but said she had to protect her children's future. Thanksgiving arrived with court-ordered split holidays. Wendy insisted Tagliatelle was family now. My 8-year-old refused to eat at the table with him, the tension visible to everyone. My parents noticed Tagliatelle wearing my watch, a gift from my late grandfather. Elena's friend from the Attorney General's office pulled me aside at a chance encounter. She mentioned Tagliatelle was under investigation for elder financial abuse from a previous relationship. She couldn't share details but suggested I document everything. Wendy emailed requesting I sign a quitclaim on the house to simplify finances. Attached was a photo of her and Tagliatelle with a realtor at a new luxury condo development, price range well above our means. Then came the worst call. My 6-year-old had dialed 911 during an argument at the house. Wendy explained to police it was a misunderstanding. Tagliatelle charmed the officers while my child stood there shaking. Child Protective Services opened a file. The body cam footage later showed wine bottles covering the counter. The intervention attempt at Wendy's parents' house was painful to watch. She arrived late with Tagliatelle, who immediately tried to control the narrative. Her father, a quiet man who rarely slowly raised his voice, finally stood up. "Get out of my house," he told Tagliatelle. Wendy's hands shook throughout the entire confrontation. The financial forensic review revealed the true damage. Tagliatelle had transferred $50,000 from Wendy's inheritance account. She claimed she'd invested in his business, but no documentation existed. The custody evaluator's visit to both homes raised red flags. She found Tagliatelle disciplining my children. My 8-year-old told her firmly, "He's not my dad and never will be." Wendy called our daughter brainwashed. In response, Elena discovered Tagliatelle was already on dating apps. His profile claimed he was a recently widowed entrepreneur, using photos taken in my former home. The location showed he was active while supposedly at the house with Wendy and my children. Wendy missed 3 custody exchanges in a row, claiming miscommunication each time. When Tagliatelle finally dropped the kids off hours late, he told them, "Your mom is sick because your dad is stressing her out." The final divorce hearing was heartbreaking. Wendy appeared thin and exhausted, makeup covering something on her neck. She barely spoke as Tagliatelle whispered constant instructions in her ear. The bailiff positioned himself closer to their table, clearly sensing something wrong. The judge granted 50-50 custody and ordered the house sold. Tagliatelle's face darkened as he realized no windfall was coming. Wendy looked simultaneously relieved and terrified. 2 weeks later, at 2 a.m., my phone lit up with texts from Wendy. "He won't leave. I asked him to give me space and he won't leave. The locks are changed, but he has keys." The typing bubbles appeared and disappeared for 10 minutes after that message. I stared at my phone screen, watching those typing bubbles appear and disappear. My hands trembled as I typed back, "Call 911 if you're in danger." No response. The bubbles vanished completely. I threw on clothes and drove to the house at 2:15 a.m. Every light blazed inside. Through the living room window, I saw Tagliatelle pacing, gesturing wildly, while Wendy sat hunched on the couch. I called the police from my car, explaining the situation. They arrived within minutes. The officers knocked, and Tagliatelle answered with a practiced smile. He explained that Wendy was emotional and confused about their relationship status. Wendy stood behind him, arms wrapped around herself, saying nothing. The officers asked if she wanted him to leave. She glanced at Tagliatelle, then shook her head. I watched from the driveway as the police left. Tagliatelle noticed me and waved mockingly before closing the door. My phone buzzed, a text from Wendy. "Please just go. You're making things worse." The next morning, I picked up the kids for school. They climbed into my car with their backpacks, and my 8-year-old immediately started talking. "Tag threw mom's phone last night. It broke against the wall." My 6-year-old nodded, clutching her stuffed rabbit tighter. At drop-off, their teacher pulled me aside. She'd noticed behavioral changes. My 8-year-old had become protective of her sister, refusing to leave her side during recess. The 6-year-old had started sucking her thumb again. The school counselor wanted to meet with both parents, but Wendy kept canceling. Elena texted me that afternoon with screenshots from Tagliatelle's dating profile. He'd updated it to show him as a successful real estate developer, living in an upscale neighborhood, my neighborhood. The photos showed him cooking in my kitchen, working at my desk, playing with my kids' toys in the background. I forwarded everything to my lawyer, who suggested hiring a private investigator. The retainer would drain my savings, but I needed ammunition for the custody battle. The PI, a former cop named Chris, started surveillance immediately. 3 days later, Wendy's sister Alexandra called in tears. Their mother had tried visiting Wendy unannounced and found Tagliatelle alone in the house. He told her Wendy was indisposed and suggested she call before visiting their home. When she insisted on seeing her daughter, he'd closed the door in her face. The family intervention moved forward despite Wendy's absence from planning. Her parents, both siblings, and 2 cousins gathered at her childhood home. I wasn't invited, but heard the details from Alexandra later. Wendy arrived 90 minutes late, with Tagliatelle driving. She'd lost more weight, her clothes hanging loose. During the intervention, Tagliatelle answered every question directed at Wendy. When her father demanded he leave the family meeting, Tagliatelle refused, claiming Wendy needed his support. Her brother stood up, fists clenched, and Tagliatelle pulled out his phone to document the hostility. Wendy finally spoke, asking everyone to respect her choices before leaving with him. Chris, the PI, called with his first report. Tagliatelle had been visiting pawn shops with jewelry, women's jewelry. He'd also been photographed entering a casino twice that week, staying for hours. The parking garage cameras showed him driving my old BMW, which Wendy had kept in the divorce. My 8-year-old's journal entries became more disturbing. She wrote about Tagliatelle going through mommy's papers late at night, yelling about investments and opportunities. She described finding her mother crying in the bathroom, door locked, while Tagliatelle pounded on it, demanding she stop being dramatic. The credit card fraud escalated. 3 more cards opened in my name, all maxed out within days. The charges included expensive dinners, designer clothes in Tagliatelle's size, and cash advances. I spent hours on the phone with fraud departments, filing police reports, freezing my credit. Lisa reached out, desperate to make amends. Her divorce was finalized, and she'd lost primary custody due to the affair cover-up. She offered to testify about Wendy's relationship timeline, providing text messages and photos. The evidence showed Tagliatelle had been pursuing Wendy for months before I discovered the affair. At the next custody exchange, Wendy looked hollow-eyed. She dropped the kids off wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky. My 6-year-old ran to me, whispering, "Mommy has a bruise on her arm." Tag grabbed her too hard. I documented everything, photographing the children's statements in my notebook. Chris discovered Tagliatelle's real name wasn't even Tagliatelle. It was a nickname he'd adopted to sound more exotic. His legal name was Linguini McMarinara, and he had a string of fraud complaints across 3 states. None had resulted in convictions, as the women always dropped charges or disappeared from proceedings. The school called about an incident. My 8-year-old had shoved a classmate who'd asked about her new dad. She'd screamed that Tagliatelle wasn't her father and never would be. When I picked her up from the principal's office, she broke down sobbing in my arms. Wendy's work contacted me, concerned. She'd missed multiple days without calling in. Her supervisor, who'd known us both for years, mentioned Wendy had seemed distracted and fearful in recent weeks. She'd also asked about cashing out her 401k, claiming a family emergency. The forensic accountant I'd hired found more financial hemorrhaging. Wendy had taken out a home equity line of credit on our house, forging my signature. The $75,000 had vanished into an account that was immediately closed. The bank launched an investigation, but the money was gone. Elena met me for coffee with news. She'd connected with 2 other women who dated Linguini Taglia. Both told similar stories: whirlwind romance, quick cohabitation, drained finances, and escalating control. One woman, Christy, had lost her entire entire inheritance. The other had barely escaped with her life after he'd become violent when she'd tried to leave. My lawyer filed emergency motions for full custody, citing the financial fraud and children's testimonies. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out. I gathered every piece of evidence: bank statements, the PI's photos, the children's journal entries, text messages, and witness statements. Tagliatelle must have sensed the walls closing in. He started love-bombing Wendy publicly, flowers delivered to her office when she actually went, elaborate Facebook posts about their love conquering all, expensive gifts she couldn't afford. The performance felt desperate. Then Wendy's car disappeared. She claimed it was being serviced, but Chris spotted it at a used car lot with a for sale sign. The dealer confirmed Tagliatelle had sold it, presenting a power of attorney that Wendy had allegedly signed. The money went into an account only he could access. My parents stepped in, offering to pay for additional legal help. They'd watched their grandchildren suffer and couldn't stand by anymore. We hired a specialist in financial abuse cases who'd handled similar situations. She warned me these men rarely left willingly. They had to be forced out or find a new target. The children's behavioral changes worsened. My 6-year-old developed a stress rash that wouldn't heal. The 8-year-old started hoarding food in her backpack, afraid there wouldn't be enough at mom's house. Their pediatrician documented everything, noting signs of emotional trauma. Wendy missed the custody hearing. Her lawyer appeared alone, requesting a continuance due to his client's medical emergency. The judge, already irritated by the pattern of absences, granted 1 week. He warned this was the final delay he'd tolerate. That night, Alexandra called frantic. She'd driven past Wendy's house and seen an ambulance. The neighbors reported Wendy had fallen down the stairs. Tagliatelle told paramedics she'd been drinking and lost her balance. The hospital confirmed a mild concussion and bruised ribs. I visited Wendy in the hospital, finding her alone. She looked fragile against the white sheets, her face pale and drawn. When I entered, she started crying. "I can't get him to leave," she whispered. "He has keys to everything. He knows all my passwords. He said he'll ruin me if I make him go." Hospital security arrived, saying Tagliatelle was demanding to see his fiancée. Wendy's eyes went wide with fear. I told security she didn't want visitors, showing them the separation papers. They escorted Tagliatelle out as he shouted about his rights and threatened lawsuits. The hospital social worker interviewed Wendy about domestic violence resources. She denied abuse but accepted pamphlets with shaking hands. I stayed until visiting hours ended, watching her sleep fitfully. The bruises on her arms had darkened to purple-black. Chris called with urgent news. Tagliatelle had been at the house, loading boxes into a rental truck. He photographed him taking electronics, artwork, even small appliances. The neighbors confirmed he'd been coming and going all day while Wendy was hospitalized. My lawyer filed for an emergency protective order on Wendy's behalf, using the hospital records and witness statements. The judge granted a temporary order requiring Tagliatelle to stay away from the house and surrender any keys. The sheriff would serve him within 24 hours. The kids sensed the shift. During their next visit, they relaxed for the first time in months. We made pancakes and watched movies, pretending things were normal. My 8-year-old asked if mommy was going to be okay. I promised we'd make sure she was safe. Elena forwarded a warning from Christy. When she tried to leave Linguini, he'd escalated dramatically, draining accounts, destroying property, threatening her family. She'd eventually fled the state, starting over with nothing. "Don't underestimate him," she wrote. "He'll burn everything down rather than leave empty-handed." The protective order service went badly. Tagliatelle barricaded himself in the house, refusing to answer the door. It took 6 hours and a locksmith before deputies could serve him. He emerged ranting about conspiracies and false accusations, recording everything on his phone. Wendy was discharged to her parents' house. She looked broken, moving slowly and flinching at sudden noises. Her mother had to help her shower and change clothes. The transformation from the confident woman I'd married to this shell was devastating to witness. Tagliatelle violated the protective order within 12 hours, showing up at Wendy's parents' house with flowers and a teddy bear. Her father called police while her brother blocked the door. Tagliatelle was arrested, spending the night in jail before posting bail. The forensic accountant's final report was staggering. In 4 months, Tagliatelle had drained or stolen over $200,000 through various schemes. Wendy's credit was destroyed, her retirement gone, her children's college funds emptied. The house faced foreclosure from the fraudulent equity loan. My 8-year-old asked to speak at the custody hearing. Despite my concerns, the judge allowed it in chambers. She told him about Tagliatelle's temper, her mother's tears, the fear in their house. She said she didn't feel safe there anymore. The judge's expression grew increasingly grim. Wendy appeared at the rescheduled hearing, flanked by her parents. She could barely speak above a whisper, confirming she wanted Tagliatelle removed from their lives. She agreed to temporary supervised visitation, acknowledging she needed help before having the children overnight again. The judge awarded me temporary full custody, with Wendy getting supervised visits twice a week. He ordered the house sold immediately to prevent further financial damage. Tagliatelle, watching from the gallery despite the protective order, stormed out cursing. That evening, Wendy called me crying. Tagliatelle had somehow accessed her email, sending messages to her employer claiming she was resigning. He'd also posted intimate photos on a revenge porn site. The cybercrimes unit opened an investigation, but the damage was done. Her employer, thankfully understanding, placed her on medical leave instead of accepting the resignation. They'd seen too many domestic violence cases to be fooled. They offered counseling through their employee assistance program, which Wendy finally accepted. The house sale proceeded in chaos. Tagliatelle showed up during every showing, telling potential buyers about legal disputes and title issues. Our realtor had to hire security for open houses. Despite his interference, we received an offer, below market value, but enough to pay off the fraudulent loan. Chris tracked Tagliatelle to a motel on the outskirts of town. He'd been evicted from 2 others for causing disturbances. His Mercedes had been repossessed, and he was driving a hit-up rental car. The descent from successful businessman facade to desperate grifter was rapid. My children started therapy, slowly processing their trauma. The 6-year-old drew pictures of their family that no longer included Tagliatelle. The 8-year-old wrote a letter to her mother about feeling scared and confused. The therapist said healing would take time, but was possible. Elena called with final news before leaving town. The elder abuse investigation had expanded. 3 more victims had come forward. Prosecutors were building a case, but these things moved slowly. She wished us luck and said she was starting fresh in another state, far from the memories. Wendy's first supervised visit was heartbreaking. She met the children at a family center with a social worker present. She'd gained a little weight back and wore clothes that actually fit. The kids were hesitant at first, but slowly warmed up as she read them stories. Then came the arrest. released. Federal marshals picked up Linguini McMarinara on charges related to the elder abuse case. He'd bilked an elderly woman out of her life savings 2 years ago. With him locked up pending trial, everyone breathed a little easier. Wendy began the long process of reclaiming her life. She started intensive therapy, joined a support group for domestic abuse survivors, and worked with credit counselors to repair the financial devastation. Her family rallied around her, providing the support system Tagliatelle had tried to destroy. The children's overnight visits resumed after 3 months of supervised meetings. Their mother had found a small apartment near her parents, sparse but safe. She'd gotten her job back and was slowly rebuilding. The woman who returned wasn't the same one who'd betrayed our marriage, but someone harder earned and more aware. My lawyer filed for bankruptcy on Wendy's behalf, the only way to escape the crushing debt Tagliatelle had created. It would take 7 years to rebuild her credit, but it was a fresh start. She signed the papers with steady hands, no longer the shaking victim from months before. The divorce finalization felt anticlimactic after everything else. We sat in the courthouse conference room, signing papers that officially ended 20 years, but the marriage had really ended long before, first with betrayal, then with the nightmare that followed. This was just paperwork. As we left the courthouse, Wendy stopped me. "I know sorry isn't enough," she said quietly, "but I need you to know, that man in Italy 20 years ago, it wasn't him. Tagliatelle just used that story to get close. The real man was just some tourist I never saw again. The revelation should have mattered, but it didn't. Too much had happened. Too much damage was done." I nodded and walked to my car, where my children waited with my mother. They waved at their mom, who waved back with tears in her eyes. 3 weeks later, I was cooking dinner in my new apartment when my phone rang. Alexandra's number. "They're moving the trial up," she said. "Linguini's other victims want to testify. Wendy's been asked to give a statement. She wanted you to know." I thanked her for calling and returned to the stove where my 8-year-old was helping stir pasta. My 6-year-old colored at the table, humming softly. For the first time in months, our little home felt peaceful. Outside, spring was arriving, and nobody mentioned Italy anymore. The trial date arrived faster than expected. I sat in the courthouse hallway with my children at my mother's house, waiting for updates from Alexandra. Wendy had agreed to testify, though the prosecutor warned it might take hours. Linguini McMarinara faced 12 counts of elder financial abuse, with more charges pending. Alexandra texted me updates throughout the morning. Wendy took the stand around 10 a.m., her voice barely audible at first. She detailed the financial manipulation, the forged documents, the drained accounts. The defense attorney tried to paint her as a willing participant, but the evidence spoke louder. Bank records, forged signatures, witness statements from previous victims. During lunch recess, Wendy's parents emerged, looking drained. Her father told me she'd broken down twice during testimony, needing breaks to compose herself. The judge had been patient, understanding the trauma involved. Other victims testified after her. Elderly women who'd lost retirement savings, younger women who'd escaped before total financial ruin. My 8-year-old called after school, excited about her science project. She'd grown a bean plant and wanted to show me during our weekend. The normalcy of her enthusiasm felt precious after months of chaos. My 6-year-old grabbed the phone to tell me about her new friend at school, chattering about playground games. The verdict came 3 days later. Guilty on all counts. Linguini McMarinara would serve federal time, though the exact sentence wouldn't come for weeks. Alexandra called with the news while I was grocery shopping. I stood in the cereal aisle, relief washing over me as other shoppers navigated around my cart. Wendy texted me that night. A simple, "Thank you for everything during the trial prep." I didn't respond immediately, unsure what to say. Our communication had become purely logistical, focused on the children's needs. The betrayal still stung, but watching her destruction had complicated my anger. The sentencing hearing brought unexpected revelations. More victims had surfaced during the trial, women from different states sharing similar stories. The judge reviewed each case methodically, the financial devastation tallying into millions. Taglia's lawyer argued for leniency, citing his client's difficult childhood, but the judge wasn't moved. 15 years federal prison, with mandatory restitution. The courtroom erupted in quiet sobs from victims who'd waited years for justice. Wendy sat with her parents, shoulders shaking. She'd never see a penny back. The money was long gone, spent on his lifestyle and gambling debts. House closing happened the following week. I met Wendy at the title company to sign final papers. She looked healthier, wearing clothes that fit properly again. We sat across from each other at the conference table, signing documents that dissolved our largest shared asset. The proceeds would barely cover the fraudulent loan and realtor fees. "The kids' college funds," she said quietly as we waited for the notary. "I'm going to try to rebuild them. My parents are helping. It'll take years," but she trailed off, pen hovering over another signature line. My lawyer had advised against responding to such statements, but I found myself saying, "Be okay. We'll figure it out." She nodded, blinking rapidly before returning to the paperwork. The kids' therapy sessions showed progress. My 6-year-old had stopped sucking her thumb, though she still carried her stuffed rabbit everywhere. The 8-year-old's journal entries had shifted from documenting trauma to normal kid concerns. Friends, school, her bean plant experiment. Their therapist recommended continuing for at least another year. Wendy's supervised visits transitioned to unsupervised afternoons. The first time I dropped them off at her apartment, my stomach churned with anxiety. Her place was small but clean, toys and books carefully arranged in the corner she'd designated as theirs. She met me at the door, nervous but determined. 2 hours, I reminded her, though she knew the schedule. "I made their favorite sandwiches," she said, wringing her hands, "and bought that juice they like." The girls ran past us into the apartment, immediately investigating their corner. I left quickly, sitting in my car down the block for the entire 2 hours. They emerged happy, carrying art projects they'd made with their mother. Lisa reached out through a mutual friend, asking to meet. I declined. Her divorce had finalized, and she'd moved to a smaller house across town. Our kids still attended the same school, creating awkward encounters at pickup. She'd wave sadly from across the parking lot, respecting the distance I maintained. Wendy's job situation stabilized slowly. Her employer had held her position during medical leave, and she'd returned part-time initially. She texted updates about rebuilding her 401k, working overtime when possible. Every penny went to basic expenses and the bankruptcy lawyer. 7 years to rebuild credit felt insurmountable, but she faced it without complaint. My 8-year-old won her school science fair with the bean plant project. Both Wendy and I attended, sitting separately in the gymnasium. She caught my eye during the announcement, both of us smiling at our daughter's joy. For a moment, we were just proud parents, the complications fading briefly. The 6-year-old's birthday approached, the first since everything imploded. We coordinated separate celebrations, her actual birthday with me, a party with friends friends at Wendy's the following weekend. The logistics required multiple text exchanges, carefully neutral in tone. Both girls adapted to the split celebrations without complaint, though I caught wistful looks between events. Wendy's father called one evening, asking if we could talk. He wanted to contribute to the girls' college funds directly, bypassing Wendy to ensure the money remained safe. We met at a coffee shop, where he slid a check across the table with shaking hands. "It's not much," he said, "but we'll do this every month for our granddaughters." I thanked him, touched by the gesture. He aged years during the ordeal, watching his daughter's life crumble. We talked about the girls' progress, their therapy, their resilience. He left with recent school photos I'd brought, clutching them like treasures. Spring parent-teacher conferences required coordination. We attended separately at Wendy's request, the teachers carefully neutral about our family situation. Both girls were thriving academically, their early trauma not impacting their progress. The 8-year-old had become protective of classmates going through difficulties, showing empathy beyond her years. Wendy started attending a support group for financial abuse survivors. She mentioned it during a pickup, explaining why she looked tired. The meetings were Tuesday evenings at a church downtown. She'd connected with other women rebuilding from similar devastation, finding comfort in shared experiences. My apartment lease renewal arrived, forcing decisions about permanence. The girls had adapted to the smaller space, but they needed stability. I started searching for a house to rent, something with a yard and separate bedrooms. The financial strain felt heavy, but necessary for their well-being. Elena sent a final email before completely disappearing from our lives. She'd settled in her new state, started fresh with a different career. She wished us well, thanking me for the strange support we'd provided each other during the worst period. I deleted the email after reading, closing that chapter. The girls' overnight visits with Wendy expanded to full weekends. Friday evening drop-offs became routine, their overnight bags packed with practiced efficiency. They'd return Sunday evenings chattering about movies watched, cookies baked, art projects completed. Slowly, painfully, we built new rhythms. Linguini Taglia's Victim Restitution Fund held its first distribution meeting. Wendy attended with her lawyer, though expectations were low. The federal asset seizure had recovered minimal funds, some jewelry, a few hidden accounts. Dozens of victims would split pennies on the dollar of their losses. Summer arrived with scheduling challenges, day camps, vacation plans, work schedules, everything required negotiation. We managed through terse text messages and shared calendar apps. The girls spent a week with Wendy's parents at their lake cabin, their first real vacation since everything fell apart. Back to school shopping meant more coordination. We split the lists, each handling different items. Meeting in the school parking lot to transfer backpacks and supplies, we kept interactions brief but civil. The girls had stopped asking when we'd live together again, accepting their two-home reality. Wendy's apartment flooded during a summer storm, displacing her temporarily. She stayed with her parents while repairs happened, the girls adapting to another transition. I offered to keep them extra days, which she accepted gratefully. Crisis management had become second nature. The 8-year-old started asking harder questions about the divorce. Why did we split up? Where did Tag go? Would mom find another boyfriend? I answered carefully, protecting her from adult details while validating her curiosity. The therapist had prepared me for this phase. Halloween came again, 1 year after that awful parade with Tagliatelle. This time, we trick-or-treated in my new neighborhood while Wendy hosted a small party for their friends. The girls wore matching witch costumes, excited about their double celebrations. No tears, no drama, just candy and laughter. Wendy's financial stability improved marginally. She'd picked up freelance work on weekends when she didn't have the girls. Every extra dollar went toward debt or savings. She mentioned considering a second job but worried about time with the children. The balance felt impossible. Parent-teacher conferences in November showed continued progress. Both girls had formed strong friendships, their social development on track. The 6-year-old's teacher mentioned she'd stopped carrying her stuffed rabbit to school, a sign of growing security. Small victories felt monumental. Thanksgiving required delicate negotiations. My family wanted the girls for dinner, as did Wendy's parents. We split the day, lunch with her family, dinner with mine. The girls traveled between celebrations without complaint, though the 8-year-old mentioned missing when everyone was together. Alexandra called with news about Wendy's therapy progress. She'd completed a financial literacy course, part of rebuilding from Tagliatelle's destruction. She was also seeing a counselor individually, working through trauma and guilt. Alexandra thought I should know Wendy was really trying. The girls performed in their school winter concert, both of us attending from opposite sides of the auditorium. They waved excitedly at both parents, comfortable with our separation. After the show, we managed brief congratulations to them together before departing separately. Christmas approached with its own challenges. We agreed to maintain Santa traditions despite logistics complications. Gifts would be from Santa at both houses, with coordinated lists to avoid duplicates. The magic mattered more than our discomfort. Wendy texted on Christmas Eve after the girls were asleep at her place. "Thank you for making this work. I know I destroyed everything, but you've kept them whole." I stared at the message for an hour before responding simply, "Merry Christmas." New Year's Eve passed quietly. The girls were with Wendy, and I spent it at my brother's house. At midnight, my 8-year-old FaceTimed to wish me Happy New Year, her sister already asleep. Wendy's voice in the background reminded them about bedtime. Normal divorced family life. January brought the final divorce decree in the mail, the official end of our marriage, reduced to county clerk stamps and judge signatures. I filed it away with other important papers, another document in our complicated history. 20 years compressed into a manila folder. The girls thrived in their new stability. School projects, play dates, sports activities, life moved forward. They mentioned Wendy's continued therapy, her weekend job at a retail store, her small victories rebuilding. I listened without comment, glad for their mother's progress. By February, we'd achieved functional co-parenting. Pickup exchanges became smooth, communication stayed child-focused, boundaries held firm. The girls moved between homes with practice ease, their resilience both heartbreaking and inspiring. One Tuesday evening, I saw Wendy entering the church where her support group met. She looked determined, carrying a notebook and coffee. I drove past without stopping, respecting her journey toward healing. We'd both changed, scarred but surviving. March brought the 8-year-old's birthday. Like her sisters, we split celebrations. The coordination felt almost normal now, texting about cake flavors and guest lists. Both parties succeeded, our daughter beaming through both events. We'd learned to create joy despite circumstances. Spring break required extensive planning. Wendy couldn't afford a vacation but didn't want the girls to miss out. My parents offered to take them to the beach, including Wendy if she could get time off work. She declined gracefully, prioritizing their experience over over her pride. The school year ended with award ceremonies and class parties. Both girls earned recognition, perfect attendance, reading achievements, citizenship awards. We sat in the same auditorium, separated by rows, applauding our children's success. They'd survived our destruction and flourished anyway. Summer arrived again. 13 months since that birthday party implosion. The girls spent mornings at day camp, afternoons split between parents. Wendy had saved enough for modest activities, library programs, free concerts, picnics. She made their time special without spending money she didn't have. In July, I received notice that Linguini McMarinara had been transferred to a facility closer to his sentencing state. His victims would have easier access for restitution hearings. Wendy attended each one, though recovery remained unlikely. She needed the closure more than the money. August meant back-to-school preparation again. This time, we managed shopping more smoothly, even meeting at Target to let the girls choose backpacks together. We maintained distance but achieved civility. The girls picked matching unicorn designs, excited for 2nd and 4th grade. Labor Day weekend, Wendy texted about a scheduling conflict. Her retail job required holiday hours, but she didn't want to miss her weekend. We worked out a solution. She'd take them Monday instead. Flexibility had replaced rigid adherence to schedules. September settled into routine. School, activities, homework, bedtime. Two homes functioning independently but connected through our daughters. They'd stopped viewing it as broken, simply accepting it as their normal. Children adapt when adults manage their own emotions. October arrived with familiar rhythms. Costume planning, pumpkin picking, fall festivals. We attended separate events, the girls enjoying double celebrations. They'd learned to navigate having 2 homes, 2 bedrooms, 2 sets of everything. Their resilience amazed everyone. The 1-year anniversary of Tagliatelle's arrest passed without fanfare. Wendy continued therapy, worked her jobs, rebuilt slowly. I focused on stability for the girls, my own healing, moving forward. We'd survived the worst year imaginable and found new equilibrium. November brought the holidays again. This time, planning felt routine rather than painful. We'd established patterns that worked, prioritizing the girls' happiness over our discomfort. They moved between celebrations seamlessly, secure in both parents' love despite everything. My 8-year-old won another science fair, this time with a crystal growing experiment. Wendy and I both attended, sitting separately but sharing proud smiles. She'd helped with the project during her weekends, contributing despite limited resources, co-parenting small victories. December marked 18 months since that birthday party revelation. The girls were happy, healthy, thriving in school. Wendy had achieved basic financial stability, though recovery would take years. I'd built a new life centered on fatherhood. We'd all changed, adapted, survived. Christmas came with established traditions now. Split celebrations felt normal rather than tragic. The girls woke up excited in both homes, Santa having visited both chimneys. We'd preserved their magic despite adult failures. On New Year's Day, while the girls played at Wendy's, I reflected on our journey. From betrayal through destruction to this fragile peace. Not the life I'd planned, but one we'd built from ruins. The girls were okay. That mattered most. My phone buzzed, Wendy texting about pickup time. Simple logistics between co-parents. I confirmed the schedule and pocketed my phone. Outside, winter sun broke through clouds. Life continued, ordinary and complicated. Nobody mentioned Italy anymore, and that was okay.